Hi, my name is Maureen Perry and I work for the Coachella Valley Water District. We're going to be talking about water today. And my friend here, Tutor Tortoise, is going to help with our presentation in that he's going to put some questions up there and I'll read them for you and we'll see how we can answer those questions. So we're going to be talking about water today. And when we look at our planet, the planet Earth, this is taken from outer space, we see that it is very round and it's shaped like a sphere or a ball, kind of. Now we see that there's one color that's most prominent on our globe, on our Earth. What color is that? It's blue, that's right. Now what does blue generally mean when you see it on our globe here? Well, it's water. That's right. And water covers about 70% or more than 2/3 of the planet's surface. Now, in addition to all the blue that you see, you can see some clouds up there in the air, but you see other areas that are kind of brown and green. What are those areas? That's land. And the land on this planet is broken into areas that we call continents. Now, to see all the continents at once, we have to look at this a little differently. So we are going to look at a map of the world. And this is what it looks like. So we're going to call out the different continents. But before we begin, can anyone tell me how many continents there are on our planet? There are 7 continents. And we'll start and work our way from the bottom, and then we'll go from right to left. And we live on one of these continents. And I'm going to see if when I call it out, you can tell me which one we live on. So if we look at the very bottom, we see a big white area. What continent is that? That is Antarctica, where the penguins live. Now, if we go off to the right, we see one area that looks kind of like it's a big island. Does anyone know what the name of that continent is? It's the name of a continent and a country all at the same time. And it's where kangaroos live. Does anyone know the name of that continent? It's Australia. And then we have a really large continent just a little bit to the left of that. It's half brown and half green in our map here. That continent is Africa. Now the area just above it, which has a brown spot in the middle and then it's green all around, that's actually 2 continents. But on the far right part of it would be the Asian continent. And on the left, right above Africa, is the European continent. Okay, so we've now named Antarctica, Australia, Africa, Asia, and Europe. We have 2 more to go to make our 7. So what's the one with the big point that's almost touching that white area down, which is Antarctica? That is the South American continent. So we have 1 left, and that's right above it. That is the North American continent. Now, of all 7 of those continents, which one do you think we live on? Well, if you said the North American continent, you are right. We live on the North American continent. Now, our continent has more than 1 country on it, and this is called the United States. Does anyone have an idea why we call it the United States of America? Well, it's because our United States is broken into 50 different states. And this is what they look like. Now, the big area that we see with all the colors on it is called the Continental 48. So there are 48 states in that area. And then we see we have Alaska up and to the left that's blue, and out there in the middle of the ocean, we have another state, and that is Hawaii. So the 48 plus 2 equals 50 states in our United States of America. Now, we live in one of those states. Does anyone know what the name of our state is? You're right, it's California. So that has just come in here. It's popping red and yellow and blue. That is California. Now that's the part of the country that we live in, but can you tell me where we live in California? Well, I'm bringing in a big blue dot here that's now flashing, and it's down in the very corner, the lower right corner of the state. That is where we live, and our area is called the Coachella Valley. So if we look at it a little bit bigger, we can see here that California is right on the coast. Now there's a lot of water near California. It's called the Pacific Ocean. So we're not too far from it, but we're far enough that we don't get to use that water for anything unless we drive a very long ways. So this is what the area that we live in looks like. It's pretty dry. Now there are lots of water in other parts of the United States, but not out here. But interestingly, even though we don't have very much water, we still have a lot of farms. And this is two farmers, and they're inspecting a crop of bell peppers. And if we were to cut one of those bell peppers open, we would see that there's all kinds of stuff inside that pepper. What is that? Those are seeds. Now, why is it important for a plant to have seeds? That's right. It helps us grow another plant. And if you look behind the farmers, you can see all that green. And all that green came from little seeds that were put into the dirt to grow. So I'm going to show you a few more things, and if you want to name them as we bring them up, we'll go through that. What are these? You're right, they're strawberries. Now look at all the little speckles on those strawberries. What do you think those little speckles are? Those are seeds. That's right. So on the bell pepper, the seeds were on the inside, but with strawberries, they're on the outside. Do we eat the seeds from bell pepper? Usually not. But do we eat the seeds on a strawberry? Yes. Could you imagine trying to get all those little seeds off and still have any strawberry left to eat? I think that would be really hard. What are these? Now that's a little bit difficult to tell, but they grow in a big palm tree. They grow in something that we call a date palm. So what might those fruits be on our picture? That's right, they are dates. How many of you like dates? I love them. They're so sweet and yummy for you. Lots of vitamins in them. What are these? They turn nice and golden color when they're ripe and ready to eat. Those are called mangoes. Ooh, what are these? Those are onions. Now we don't see any seeds on that onion, and that's because the onion grows underground. And if this plant had seeds on it, they would be in a flower that would form on the very top of the plant above the ground. Ooh, yum. What are these? Grapes. Now grapes sometimes have a seed in them that you can grow, but often grapes are grown from a shoot off of the plant that you put in water, you let it get roots, and then it will grow all by itself. Ooh, what are these? They can be sour. Yes, those are lemons. Ooh, look at those. Nice oranges. How many of you like oranges? Good, because they're really good for you to eat. And another picture, this is what dates look like when they've been harvested and they're ready to go to the market. But we've seen a lot of different plants. What is it that plants really need? And who is it that grows all of this stuff for us? What do we call someone that grows food for us to eat that we can go to the store and buy, or we can go to the farmer's market and buy? Who are those people and what are they called? Farmers, that's right. Farmers do a lot of wonderful things for us because they grow fruits and vegetables, and they're a community partner. Without farmers, we wouldn't have food to eat. So we need farmers, and farmers work really hard because plants never stop growing and they always need to be taken care of. So farmers are very important to us, especially here in the Coachella Valley with all of the farms that we have. So when we think about a plant, what is it that plants need in order to grow? So what do farmers' plants need in order to grow? Well, let's take a look at that. Do they need sunlight? Yes. And soil. They need soil. We put a seed in the ground. Now you can grow some plants in just water, but that's really hard to do. It's more fun to watch a plant grow in the soil or in the earth. Chocolate. Oops! Do plants need chocolate? No, I was just checking to see if you were paying attention. But no, we like chocolate, but plants don't really care. They don't want chocolate. What about air? Is air important for plants? Absolutely. In fact, air is very interesting because a plant will take something that we breathe out. It's called carbon dioxide, and they will breathe that in. And then that plant will use that carbon dioxide for food, to make food, and then they breathe something out that we need. Does anyone know what that is? It's oxygen. And what about water? Yes, absolutely. Plants need water in order to grow. So of all the things that plants need, they need sunlight, soil, air, and water. We have a lot of sun out here in the desert. In fact, sometimes the sun is so bright you want to put your sunglasses on so that it doesn't hurt your eyes because we've got so much sun. Do we have soil out here? A lot of soil? Yes, we have a lot of soil, and it's very good for growing plants in. What about air? Do we have a lot of air? Yes, we have an awful lot of air. In fact, the air here blows a lot, and sometimes it makes these windmills turn, and we make energy from those windmills turning. So isn't that just very cool? We not only use that air, but it creates something for us. And just a question to ponder, a thought to think about. Do you know that air fills every space on this planet that something else doesn't? Piece of furniture, there's air all around it. So just think about that the next time you look at a box and say there's nothing in it. Is there air in that box? Absolutely. Now water. Is water something that we have a lot of? Well, judging from this picture that looks like our desert, we don't have a lot of water. But the good thing is we do have a very good source of water, and it's underground. Because we really only get about 3 inches of rain a year here. Now that's not nearly enough to keep a plant growing for an entire year. So let's take a look at what this water underneath us looks like. In fact, you may be sitting in a chair right now that would be on top of this huge area of water beneath us. And what is that area called? It's called an aquifer. That's right. And it means that water is stored underground. It is stored between all of the grains of sand and dirt and soil that we find down beneath our feet. If we were to dig a hole, we would see that there is air in some of those spaces. Well, that air gets moved out and water comes in, and that creates an aquifer. Now, how does that water get underground anyway? Well, there's a number of different ways. We get snow pretty much every year, maybe not a lot, but we do get some snow. And when the weather starts to warm up, that snow will begin to melt. It will run down the mountain canyons, and eventually it will make its way to the valley floor, where it will soak in and become part of our aquifer. Isn't that cool? And another way that water gets into our aquifer is when we get rain. Now, I realize we only get about 3 inches of rain, as I said earlier, but still, every little bit helps. And that will soak into our aquifer as well, adding to the amount of water that we have. Now, there's one more way that water will get into the ground. And it's not coming from the sky by snow or rain, but it's the way we put water back in the ground on purpose, and it's called replenishment. And that water comes from the Colorado River, which is more than 100 miles away from here. We bring water in big pipes that then we put down on the ground to do nothing more than to soak back into the ground to help replace some that we take out every day to bring water to every single home here in the valley. So we use Colorado River water to replace some of what we use, and that keeps our aquifer nice and healthy. So when we look at our desert, we may not realize that we have a whole area beneath us that's filled with water. Now there's another way that water got into our aquifer, but it happened a long time ago. And if we look at this picture here, we can see that there's a dark line that runs right about through the center of the picture, a little above the center of the picture. That's a dark line. Can you all see that line? That is a line where water used to get to when that Colorado River would flood this valley. And when the water got that high, we had a very large lake here. It was called ancient Lake Kiowa. And sometimes that lake would go from mountain range to mountain range and all the way down from the ocean all the way up to Palm Springs. And that was called ancient Lake Kiowa. And then when the river stopped flowing the direction that brought the river here, the water here in the first place, it would redirect and go back down to where it normally would flow, and that lake would dry up. So it would fill up when the river would flow into the valley, and then over time, that water would eventually go away when the water moved another direction. Now, a lot of that water would evaporate, but what do you think happened to the rest of that water? It would soak into the ground. That's right. So we have water from the Colorado River that's been down there for hundreds and hundreds of years. And if you look closely at this picture down in the lower right corner, we can see that there's a truck in this photograph. And what that is showing is just how far up that water line really was. When it was up that high, the lake was over 300 feet deep. So a pretty deep and a pretty large lake. So when you think about where our water comes from today, when you turn on the faucet in your home, that water has all come from that aquifer that is beneath us, that's in the ground. So we can have it, our kitties, our animals can have it, and we can take our baths in it. That's where that water has come from, is the aquifer. So when we think about water and how much we use every day, do you think it's a good idea to waste water? Is it a good idea to waste anything for that matter? Well, no, but particularly not water. So we should do our best to not waste water. How can we help save a little bit of water? Well, we can turn the water off when we're brushing our teeth every morning, and I hope you all brushed your teeth this morning. That would save a few gallons of water every day. If every home did that, can you imagine how many homes doing that would save a lot of water. And old Grizzly Bear here, he says to turn the showers off quicker than we might otherwise do. So most of us can take a shower in about 5 minutes. All you need to do is get in, get wet, soap up, and rinse off, and you're ready to go. So Grizzly says take shorter showers to save water. And another thing that we can do, or you can suggest to your parents, is that they put a nozzle on their hose. And what that nozzle does is it keeps the water from coming out of the hose when you don't need it. So if you're helping mom and dad wash the car, they don't need that water running. They can use it, press the nozzle handle, get water to rinse the car off when they need to, and then release the handle and the water stops. Isn't that great? What a great way to save water. So we call it putting nozzles on your hoses. And you can see here that Mr. Elephant's giving those zebras a nice little bath. But he can always turn it off, right? Good deal. So now let's go back in time and look at a few things, okay? So Tutor Tortoise is asking us and telling us, let's go back and look at the way things used to be. So this picture is showing us that this is some farmers from over 100 years ago. So people have been farming in this valley for well over 100 years now. And this was how they got their water. They knew there was water in the ground, and they would drill a hole in the ground. And when it got down to a certain depth, that water would come shooting up out of the ground. And you can see that there's a pipe in the ground as well. You can see that pipe. And they would sink that pipe so far down that they would get through a layer that was down there holding the water down, and then that water would shoot up. So can you see the pipe? Yeah, look at that water. It's about 8 feet. Shooting out of the ground all by itself. And it's tapping in to the aquifer that is beneath us. Well, as more and more farmers came to the valley, they started putting their pipes in the ground too. And pretty soon, there were hundreds of farmers doing this, and they didn't turn that water off when they had finished watering their plants for the day. That water just kept flowing all day long. And pretty soon, the aquifer started going down, and some of those pipes that were in the ground actually stopped producing water completely. And this became very concerning for the farmers because one thing that plants all need is water. And back then, we didn't have a way to bring water to them other than this aquifer. That was the only water that we knew of here in the valley that was easy to get. So some of the people started thinking, look at this water flowing. And this is another farmer that was using water, and it would just flow and flow. So they were talking amongst themselves one day, and they said, hey, the aquifer is going down. Are we running out of water? Well, they didn't really know, because we didn't know how big the aquifer was. In fact, we really don't know how big it is today. We have an estimate on what we think it might be, but we really don't know because we can't get down there and look at it. So farmers were very concerned that they might someday run out of water. So they said, how much is down there? Is it a little bit or a lot? Well, as I said, we had no way of knowing how much water was down beneath us. So they thought a little bit amongst themselves, and they had a conversation. They said, well, maybe we should create a water district or somebody that can be in charge of this water for us so that we never run out. So again, here's another well with water shooting up out of the ground. This pipe's not nearly as long, but you can see how high up it's going. And they all got together, and they took a vote, and they said, should we make a water district or not? And everyone said, if you're in favor of this water district, say aye. And everyone, almost everyone said aye, that they meant they wanted to create a water district. And once the water district, Coachella Valley Water District, was formed, we took a look at the situation and we said, well, okay. What we went back to the farmers and said, we need you to stop using this water that's in the ground because we may run out. And they said, well, but we need this water to grow food. But where will we get water to grow our food? They said. And we said back to them, we will build you a canal. And that canal will bring water from a long ways away to the Coachella Valley for you to use for watering all of your beautiful plants so you can continue to grow. And they were all very happy about that. So we got a big round of cheers. And they said, okay, we'll stop using the water that's in the ground if you build us this canal. So this here is a picture of our canal. It looks like a river. It is not a river because it's man-made and it's all lined in cement. And we do that for two reasons. One is to make sure the water gets where we want it to go and that it doesn't soak into the ground before it gets to our farmers. And so we can conserve water as it's flowing. But something that creating the canal and lining it with concrete creates a little bit of a problem. If you can see that brown line on the side, that is mud, and that mud sticks to everything. So that water in the canal all comes from the Colorado River. Can you all say that with me? The Colorado River. That's right. And here in this picture, we see the canal. And the canal is this nice, beautiful, winding path of water that brings water to us for our farmers. And you can see all those beautiful green crops. And that is grapes, mostly, that we can see in that picture. But we bring water to farmers throughout the Coachella Valley. Now, the aquifer had gone down quite a bit when farmers were using that water for growing their plants. But what do you think happened to that water when farmers stopped using the water from the ground and started using the water in the canal? That's right, the water level came back up to where it had been before. And that made everyone happy because they knew that if they used it just for their homes, they would not run out of water. So they began using that water from the canal to grow all of those beautiful crops. Now, the canal is a wonderful thing. It brings water to our farmers. It delivers that water right. We deliver water right to a farmer's property. But along with that comes some hazards. And the hazard is that this water is in a concrete channel, like a river. But it's shaped in a very interesting shape. And we'll take a look at that here. If you look at the shape, it's shaped like a trapezoid, which means it's narrower on the bottom than it is on the top. And what that does, and the sides are very slanted, and what that does is creates a current in the water. And what we see with that water, and it's pretty deep too, it's about 12 feet deep on average, sometimes a little less, but the sides being slanted or steep, and it being narrow on the bottom and wider on the top, creates a certain dynamic in the water. And what that means, see that shape there? What that means is the water that's flowing across the bottom of the canal is flowing much faster than the water that's on the top. So when we look at the canal, what we see is that water that's moving very slowly. And it looks pretty lazy. Sometimes it doesn't appear to be moving very fast at all, but the water on the bottom is moving quite fast. And this creates something called an undertow in the water. So if you were to get into the canal, and as you get into the water, there will be a pull on you from the underside of the water, and it kind of pulls you down. And there is a current in that water also, which pulls you along. And those can be two very dangerous things. And the reason why it's dangerous is because the canal being all lined in cement means that that dirt that sticks to the side gets very slippery, and you can't climb out of it. And we really don't have much in the way of stairs for you to get out either, or steps. We do have them, but they're very hard to see. So the canal has very steep sides, and then we've got this thick, slippery mud that sticks to the sides. And it's not just right there at the water surface. It covers the entire side and the bottom, like this picture shows. And you can see how that mud would keep you from getting any kind of grip, because concrete is so hard that you can't dig your fingers or your toes into it, so you have nothing to hold on to. And then you have that slippery mud that just doesn't let you get any traction in the water. So that's what makes this canal very dangerous. We do put signs up along the canal. So if you ever see a pair of signs like these two signs here, that means that you're close to the canal, because the sign on the left can be used in many places throughout the water district. It's on all of our wells and reservoirs and things such as that, because we don't want people going onto the property. But the one that shows the red circle with the slash going through it is only near the canal. So if you see that sign on a fence somewhere, that means you're near the canal. It says stay out, which means don't come in here. And then it says no nades, which is Spanish. Does anyone know what those two words mean in English? Well, no nades means no swimming in English. So we tell you twice not to swim and to stay out. Now, looking a little more closely at this sign, it says stay out. Does that mean come on in and start playing? Mm-mm. And then the words no nades, which means no swimming. And another big sign, or part of the sign, is this red circle with the slash going through it. And what that always means is don't do what the pictures are doing. So this picture shows someone standing in the water when it's not very deep. It's about ankle deep. Well, is the canal safe when the water is not very deep? Mm-mm. Because the water can come back at any time, and there's no warning given when the water starts moving back up. So these are the pictures that we want to pay attention to. And then the second picture shows someone swimming in the water. Is it safe to go swimming in the canal? No siree, because if you are in that water, you have the undertow pulling on you, you have a current that's pulling you down the canal, and you also have those slippery sides. That means you can't really climb out of the canal when you're ready to get out, and you wouldn't get out at the same place that you got in because the current will have carried you away. So we ask people simply to stay out and please don't swim. Another thing that makes the canal very dangerous is that we have these things called siphons. There's about 32 of them along the canal, and these siphons are really big. In fact, they are so large that you could drive a school bus right through some of these siphons. Now, these are underground pipes. There's no air down there. There is no light. There's only water moving in that siphon. And a couple of our siphons are over a mile long. Now, it takes water about 20 minutes to move from one end of a mile-long siphon to the other end with no light and no air. I don't know anyone that can hold their breath for 20 minutes. Besides, you would be tumbling and moving around in that siphon, getting bumped up against the concrete pipe. So that's a very dangerous place to be. And this picture shows one of our little characters, Tommy, and the water starts moving very fast, about 30 feet before it goes into the siphon, because it's going downhill. So the water is being pulled into the siphon. And if you're in that water, you too get pulled right on down into the siphon. And it's too strong. The current is too strong for you to even swim against. And it looks something like this. We have a pipe that's above ground, that's the canal, and then it goes down underground and the water starts tumbling and rolling. And if you were in that pipe, you would be tumbling and rolling along with that. But remember, you have no water and no light, so you wouldn't know really where you were in the water, and you would have no air to breathe. So this is what a siphon looks like. You see that row or line of orange floaties there? That's telling you that a siphon is coming up on the canal. And that's where the current begins to increase and the water is being pulled down into that siphon. You can see the signs in the very front of that picture. And if you look at this, there's water on the back part of the picture, but then there's nothing in front of that siphon, and that means the water is now underground. So the water is flowing underground and it will pop up somewhere else along the canal. Now, a question I often get asked by students and other people is, can I go fishing on the canal? Well, we don't want you fishing on the canal because of the dangers associated with it. This looks like it would be a pretty nice place to fish, but if you look closely at this picture, you can see that the water stops. What does that mean when the water stops and it goes underground? There is a siphon there. So the water starts moving very rapidly, and it's very dangerous because you can't get out of the water. The sides are very steep. If you step too close to the side, the dirt is even very steep, and you could lose your footing, and then you would slide right on down in the canal, and you would be near a siphon that you could not get out of, and probably wouldn't come out the other end of. So we ask people to be very safe and to stay away from the canal. So we don't want you fishing there, not because we don't want you to have the fish, but that we don't want you to get hurt or to fall in and possibly drown. So we ask people not to fish in the canal. But there is a wonderful place to fish at the end of our canal, and it's called Lake Kiowa. So if you want to fish, go fishing at Lake Kiowa. You can fish from the shore there and catch a number of different kinds of fish. And if you think there are no fish in this canal, I have some news for you. This is one of our employees, and he caught a 51-pound catfish. That's a big catfish. That's a lot of fish. And he caught this at Lake Kiowa. And a few days later, his son caught another big one. Not quite that big, but it was also a very, very large catfish. So there are fish at Lake Kiowa. Now there's a couple different kinds of fish, and there are two kinds of carp. One is called a grass carp, and then we have a common carp. If you catch a common carp, like the second picture there, you can keep it. You can eat it if you like to eat carp. They're pretty bony, and I'm not a real fan of them. But the grass carp are special fish that we put in the canal on purpose, and they're called a grass carp for a reason. Can anyone guess why a carp might be called a grass carp? Well, it's because they like to eat grass. And we, at one point, when the canal was quite young, we had a lot of grass that was growing in the canal. And it would do a couple things. One, it would slow the water flow down, so it was unpredictable when water would get it to a certain place on the canal, but it would also consume a lot of the water because plants will use water. And it was just a bad combination of things. So we would spray those weeds that would grow in the canal with an herbicide or something that would kill the grass, and then we would come along and pull it all up. And you know, our farmers didn't really like that too much because it says you're putting these chemicals on this grass that goes into the water that's coming to our farms, and we're growing things too. So we tried to figure out a way to not have to spray the canal with something to kill the grass. So we came up with this idea: we'll put a grass carp in the canal, and the grass carp will eat all of the grass, and we won't have to worry about it, and the fish are okay. Now, we don't want you taking one out of the canal or out of Lake Kiowa because we buy those fish, and they're special fish that will eat nothing more than just to eat the grass that's in the canal. And grass carp are a pretty amazing fish when you think about it. This is a picture of a man holding a 70-pound grass carp. That's a big fish. And grass carp are very interesting fish. A few facts about them is that they can live to be 40 years old. Now that's a long time for a fish to live. They can get to be 100 pounds. That's even bigger than the one this man is holding right now. 100 pounds of fish. Can you imagine that? And they can eat their weight in grass every day. So if you think of a 100-pound carp, which we don't have carp that are that big in our canal, but if you were to think of one that was 100 pounds and it ate its own weight in grass every day, that's 100 pounds of grass that a single fish could eat in one day. That's a pretty big pile of grass. So it didn't take long for these grass carp to clean out our canal and make it to where it wasn't being affected by all these weeds growing in it. And grass carp have a very interesting way of eating this grass. They don't have real teeth, but they've got teeth down in their throat, and they're called pharyngeal teeth. And this little inset picture shows what those pharyngeal teeth look like. And judging from that picture, would you say that fish brushed his teeth this morning? I'd say no. So, to kind of sum up, what have we learned today? Well, we've learned a number of things. This gave you a lot of information here. We learned that our globe, our planet, is covered mostly with water. And there are some land areas too. And those land areas are broken up in things called continents. There are 7 continents, and we live on one of them, and that is the North American continent. And within the North American continent, we live in a country, and our country is called the United States of America. And we live in one of those states. There are 50 in the United States, and we live in one. And that state would be California. And where you see that little dot flashing is about where we live within the state of California. It's called the Coachella Valley. And even though we don't get a lot of rain here and we don't have a lot of water above us, we do have water below us. And that allows us to have farming here. Bringing the canal also allows us to grow many, many crops. But it was the fact that we had groundwater originally that brought farmers here to the valley. Plants need 4 basic things. They need sunlight, soil, air, and water. And we have an abundance of all of those. And when you turn on your faucet in your home, that water has come from underground, because the water that we drink that comes to your homes is groundwater, or water from the aquifer. And then we built a special canal for our farmers so that we could save and preserve the water that's in the ground so that we never run out. But the canal is a great thing because it brings water for our farmers, but it's also a very dangerous place. And we ask that everyone stay away and keep out of the area that's near the canal. And we post signs all along the canal warning people of the dangers and the fact that they should stay out to be safe. So what are some of those things that we can do to help save water? Does anyone remember? Well, let's see. We can turn it off when we brush our teeth. That's a great way to save water. We can take shorter showers, jump in, soap up, rinse off, and jump back out. And then we can put nozzles on our hoses so that water isn't running down the street when we're using it or not. And the last thing that I have to say to you about the Water District and our canal is to stay out, stay alive. 4 simple words to remember. stay out, stay alive. And I hope you all do that and that I can always come back and see you another time.